Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. She is here. And I see that you drove yourself, so you see, nothing could stop her. She came out to just, again, be with us as we as a community come together to denounce the horrific attacks that happened in Buffalo last week.
To Sophia, thank you so much for extending the invitation to the beloved community. It's in sorrow that we gather together to empower ourselves and to focus on what we need to do in this generation to put an end to the type of hatred that manifests itself in violence. I'm Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, and I proudly represent you in New York's 9th Congressional District, Central and South Brooklyn. I wanted to be here today because I knew it was important for us to gather, to undergird one another as we reflect on the heinous terrorism attack on shoppers. They could have been in the Flatbush Co-op, the Cortelia Road Co-op, that were targeted by an 18-year-old. Come on, folks, let that sink in. An 18-year-old who has not been on the planet 2 decades yet. Planning and exhibiting this type of behavior that we know of since 16 years old. Let that marinate. The thought of racial hatred has to be planted somehow. And that young man was under the jurisdiction of his parents. Let that marinate. At 16 years old, I was traipsing through this neighborhood on my way to Edward R. Murrow High School with one of the most diverse populations of students in the city of New York. What was he doing at 16 years old? He was being radicalized. He was online looking at some of the most heinous crimes that have taken place, not only in the United States, but globally. And so we have to ask ourselves, beyond everything else that we know about the gun violence, the fact that he had access to assault weapons, how do we put an end to it prior to things even getting to the point where an 18-year-old will arm themselves with hatred, military-style weapons, jump in a car, drive 200 miles, looking specifically for a black community to commit this crime in? We all have a role here, and I wish I could tell you that government is the answer, but it's not. I wish I could tell you that there was unanimity in the House of Representatives for the vote for a domestic terrorism bill yesterday, but there was not. I wish I could tell you that the entire New York congressional delegation was on board for putting an end to this violence, but it was not. We have a colleague who was tweeting out and putting out ads about replacement theory. Think about that, right here in the state of New York.
What's his name?
Her name. Her name. So when we want to think about women being a little bit more squishy, she's not that squishy. Her name is Elise Stefanik, and she's in the leadership of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. And so we've got work to do. We can pass all the legislation that we want, and believe me, it's not an easy task. I know that the domestic terrorism bill is going to go and die on the Senate side. But we needed to send a message. We need to keep fighting, keep pushing forward. We cannot abide with the hatred that would spark the type of violence that we have seen in communities across the board. It's not limited to African Americans, though that is part of the story of the United States of America. And so when we think about the synagogue in Pittsburgh, what motivated that shooter, when we think about Mother Emanuel AME Church in South Carolina, what motivated that spree of murder, young people who have become radicalized through social media and platforms. And so as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I can assure you that we are focused like a laser. That baby is strong.